Hello, this is Socially Triggered, and this video is going to be on the contradiction with immigration and the left. One of the things that the left tells, especially to those people in Canada and in the United States, is that this land, that our countries, Canada and the United States, were really built by immigrants. And that's not true. I've done videos on that in the past, but it's a narrative that they really try to enforce. So it's a way of them encouraging greater and greater amounts of immigration, because if some immigration is good and built this country, then more immigration is even better. and diversity is a strength, and just bring in all the people. Well, the funny thing is, if you go back, especially in Canada, when the first Europeans came, Canada was pretty much an empty country. It had about 50 to maybe 100,000 natives living in it. So it was just these wide open spaces with very few people in it. It was very sparsely populated. And I bet you, if you ask the natives if immigration was such a great thing, they'd probably be like, what are you talking about? So at the time, they were, it was waves of immigrants coming, well, not immigrants, but pioneers coming from Europe that were settling and building their, small towns and villages, and basically gradually encroaching upon native territories. And that's what led to many of the conflicts between the Europeans and the natives, because as they were getting, their land was getting narrower, and they're just not able to live the way they used to. And the Europeans were very different than the natives. Like, they were just culturally very different. And the natives saw this as as basically forced diversity, and they weren't too happy about it. And nowadays, the left, who promote immigration, they promote also the idea that this is stolen land. Well, if it's stolen land, then, and it was stolen based on immigration and stuff, why would you encourage further immigration? If it's truly stolen land, then we should all just leave the land and give it back to the descendants of that small group of natives that were originally here. Which might be hard, because a lot of the natives mixed with the Europeans. So it'd be a really hard thing to find. But the point is, you can't have it both ways. Either diversity is a strength, and more of it is, in building nations and stuff like that, or immigration can immigrants can steal land and prevent the culture that existed in that territory to exist. They always go on about how the natives have lost their culture and all these things. And it's actually true. I actually do believe that they lost a lot of their identity because of the waves of immigration and the waves of settlers coming in and basically taking over their lands. I'm a little bit different on the way that I interpret the history of it. Like, I see the natives as, groups all fighting with each other. There's hundreds of different native groups all fighting with each other. And I see the Europeans as just another group, another tribe, basically. And that tribe conquered the tribes that were here. And that is kind of part of human history. It's maybe not the nicest part of human history, but it's part of human history. And we can't go back and right the wrongs of the past. And to actually even say that it was a wrong thing I really don't think that that's true. I don't think it was wrong for the different native tribes to be fighting with each other and claiming their own territories. I don't judge them that way, and I don't think it's fair to judge the Europeans that way. So if you judge the Europeans as wrong, then you have to judge the natives as being wrong as well, because they each were stealing each other's land. So, you know, it's kind of like a hypocrisy at the greatest level. So this is my issue with the stance of the left. Either we've stolen this land, or immigration through immigration, or we enrich this land through immigration, or so it's either one or the other. You can't have both the same thing be both a super negative and a super positive. It just doesn't make sense. It's probably somewhere in between that the Europeans really brought over their culture and their societies, and they built a nation, and that nation became Canada. So that was another kind of thing I would really want people to understand, is that Canada, if you want to talk about who are the natives of Canada, it's not the Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal people are native to the land, but they're not native to the nation. What I mean by that is the nation is Canada. Canada is something that was built by Europeans who basically had both French and British kind of ancestry, and they had this different systems that they brought to Canada and actually merged. We get a lot of the French influence and the British influence in the way that we have the laws in Canada. And it was those systems that they brought over that really formed Canada. And once people created this nation, it became that those people who originally created the nation, they are the natural people of that nation. It is their nation, and it's part of their heritage. And the land gets associated with it because it has been conquered. Now that's very harsh. I realize that. But I see that the native Canadians are really the Europeans in this respect, because they are the ones that formed the country. They created the country that didn't exist before. And that's why in a previous video I was explaining the difference between pioneers and immigrants, that pioneers and settlers, I should say, mix the two, they're the ones that form countries, that build countries, and immigrants are the ones that come to a nation that already exists. So Canada was actually settled and built before the massive waves of immigration from other parts of Europe, and then later from other parts of the world. So really, the Canadians were these original groups from both Britain and France. So that's my stance on this. And I really want people to understand that if we continue down this path of massive immigration, we actually have records of immigration that are one of the highest in the world, where we're bringing in 500,000 people a year, up to 500,000 people a year, which compares, Canada is a relatively small population country compared to like the US. The US has about 9 to 10 times more people, but yet we have almost similar levels of immigration to the US. And it's not sustainable. There's no way you can integrate those kind of people. And it's the same mistake, in a way, the mistake that happened with the natives. They couldn't enforce their borders, and it was massive immigration that basically undermined their civilization. Another thing that I'd like to state, and this is really important, because a lot of people say, well, if the natives were just left alone, they would have built this country anyways. And I want that to be really understood, that would never have happened. The natives were here for 10,000 years. They never built anything similar to the nation that is Canada. They never built the society that Canada represents. And there was no sense that it was ever going to achieve that, because the society that is Canada, and the nation that is Canada, is a European culturally built system. It's not something that is just brought out of anywhere. It has to been created from both a British and French origin, and that really has to be understood, that you can't just not every group will form those same kind of civilizations. Look at Africa. Africa was, even up to the 1800s, it was very, very backward. And it was, the people had plenty of opportunities. They had plenty of resources, but they never developed those sophisticated societies. China built a very sophisticated society, but then because of its own philosophies became stagnant. It was only the Europeans who kind of, out of sheer survival, were able to go through an enlightenment that really changed the way that they advanced, and the philosophies that they developed, the philosophies of equality and egalitarianism, and the philosophy of capitalism, and these philosophies of rule of law, that really formed the way that they thought and really modified the way the people behaved and the culture of those people, and even maybe genetics of those people, because a lot of the systems of law, they were looking at it in England, and the system of law during the Middle Ages was very brutal. It was, if you did something wrong, you were executed, and it was a very brutal system. But what it ended up doing is it would filter out over centuries the people with like sort of aggressive tendencies, and with people, it would filter out the people who didn't fit into what the society was trying to build. And after a while, you get a certain kind of type of people surviving and breeding and having children. And that actually, so the society actually forms out of that culture, and the people's genetics get influenced by that culture of the society. So when you bring those people over to Canada, they bring over that culture, and they bring in that system of law that was very unique to those cultures. And, I'm not disparaging other countries. I'm not saying that they are bad. They have cultures that work for them, and they have systems of rules that work for them. I'm just saying that if we want to maintain this system within Canada, and we want to maintain the culture of the country, if you bring in people of different cultures, you're probably not going to be able to maintain it, because they'll want to push in their systems. There was actually a really good interview with a Muslim protester. I forgot what they were protesting, but he basically said that his goal, and the goal of many Islamic people in Canada, was to bring in Sharia law, to bring in systems that really cater to their needs. And I appreciated his honesty. And I really think that I even blame him for that attitude. It makes sense. We want to live in a society that's comfortable for the culture that we come from. So he's trying to create that for himself. But personally, as a Canadian, I do not want to see this country become an Islamic state. I don't think that's a benefit to the country. I don't think it's a benefit to my people. And I think that we would be taking a step back. So these are the kind of issues that I see, like that immigration, it has to be understood as something where it can change that culture of your society. And as long as you maintain your culture through either limiting the immigration to a small group which can be assimilated into your culture, or you only bring in people from similar cultures or people that actually appreciate the culture and want to assimilate. That's another important issue. Then you're going to lose the thing that made Canada what it is. And you're making the same mistake that ended up destroying the cultures of the natives that originally lived in this land. So this has been my thoughts on the controversies of immigration and how there's a bit of discrepancy in the way that the left has a tendency of thinking about immigration as being, bad in one way and good in another way. It just doesn't make any sense. So I kind of wanted to explain that, and hopefully I've explained it in such a way that it's clear, and that I'd love to hear your opinion on it and give me some feedback. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out my other videos because there's a lot of topics that I address, not just immigration. I talk about capitalism. I talk about a lot of social issues that are facing us, and I really try to bring in a different perspective. And I hope that my perspective at least makes you think. And if you don't agree with it, that's fine. Just tell me why not. Thanks for listening. Bye.